Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Natalie Johnson. I'm the Managing Director of Aspen Ideas Health, and we're thrilled to have you all here today. It is my great honor to introduce you all to Rachel Franklin. She's a classical and jazz concert pianist and public speaker. She has spoken and performed for organizations such as the Smithsonian Institution, the Library of Congress, and National Public Radio. We were lucky enough to find her through her programming at the Smithsonian Institute, and we are so grateful that she agreed to join us for this special session when we reached out not too long ago. So thank you so much for joining us, Rachel. You are all in for such a treat over the next 50 minutes. This is going to be a mixture of performance and presentation, and Rachel will be demonstrating how nature is represented in classical masterworks. So thanks again, Rachel. Over to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Roots Cats. Thank you for everybody who magicked me here at fairly short notice. So hello, everyone. I'm so glad that we're all here together in this beautiful place. Aspen is a hiking town, so I'd be honored if you would accompany me on a hike where one will enjoy birds and bugs and water and mountains. But we're going to do this with music, using the work of some of our greatest composers as a portal to the natural world. We're going to be walking with a group of my favorite people. I consider them my friends. It's not too weird, I promise. They are extraordinary artists, and their view of our world invites us in. It invites us to embark on our own creative rivers. So some of the music I'm playing today will be familiar to you, some a little less so, but all of it was inspired by nature, the outdoor universe, the beauty of places that enable us to channel our deepest creative spirit and connect with the transcendent. But how does a composer do that? Is music wet? Do mountains have a sound? Is it kind of cheesy to imitate birds with musical instruments? Well, to answer these questions, let's enter this magical soundscape. I want to play you the sound of a real bird for a moment. This cute little guy here. This is a shore lark, and I recorded it some years ago on a Scottish beach. I find it so soothing, so otherworldly, that I keep it on my desktop and play it when I need to take myself to a different place. In the background, you'll hear the wind across the sands, the ocean, and high above, the larks. So, is that not lovely? How's your pulse? These larks are tiny. They fly up abruptly from the dunes, and you don't really see them. They go so high, you just hear them. And they are very cute little dudes, so have a couple more photos on me. I didn't get to see them in Scotland. I just get to hear them, and just, it's adorable, aren't they? So, how would you create such a sound in music? I want to introduce you to the English composer Ralph Vaughan Williams. Handsome guy. He's one of England's, I'm not biased, I promise, he's one of England's most greatly loved composers, and as you see, he did achieve the splendid status of grand old English buffer, but he never stopped moving his listeners to tears. Vaughan Williams was a fanatical hiker, out in the field sometimes for weeks at a time. He wrote music that seems to embody the landscape of that country. Not just real countryside, but nostalgic visions of a sweeter past, a future of striving and hope, a land of mystical green pastures and blue seas. Many of us can't get close to these things, but his music helps us feel that we can. And you don't have to be English to experience this. So what we'll hear represents his experiences written into music for us. And I want to just show you a little bit of that. Because once you know what he's doing, it makes sense. And you're going to have to get used to me hopping backwards and forwards here. This is where I work off all that nice free food that you get here. So it starts with this gorgeous open sound, which symbolically is the land. It literally is the land. It's settled, it's grounded. And once it's set, the violin rises out of this piece. This is a piece written for violin and piano, and you can also find it for violin and orchestra. And out of the land emerges the lark. And it does sound like what I just played you. It's like a cadenza that just winds and weaves. And so it goes, and so it goes. It's incredibly atmospheric. He actually wrote this, he was inspired by a poem, and the poem was by the poet George Meredith. And let me just read you a few lines, because the poet entitled his poem, The Lark Ascending. He rises and begins to round. He drops the silver chain of sound, of many links without a break, in chirrup, whistle, slur, and shake. For singing till his heaven fills, 'tis love of earth that he instills, ever winging up. Our valley is his golden cup, and he the wine which overflows to us with him as he goes, till lost on his aerial wings, in light and the fancy sings. So let me play you a little of this, and we can all go flying with the larks. this piece is consistently voted #1 in every classical music top 10 in places like Australia and New Zealand, and you can see why. I have filled this presentation with fairly substantial musical clips because I really want you to be immersed in where the composer is taking us. So another composer who spent long, long days walking was Beethoven, this guy. Beethoven, the man, the myth, the legend. So here is Beethoven. And here is Beethoven. And, no, wait a minute, no, sorry about that. So, this is a really interesting one, though. This is a digital portrait, and I can't stop looking at that one, you know. It's completely fascinating to me. So, what do we know about Beethoven? He was a genius, he was eccentric, he was a visionary, he was a cultural titan for his age, and for all ages. Here's our man. So he largely spent his winters cooped up in Vienna. It was sort of smelly and cold and not very clean. Living in a series of incredibly scruffy apartments. Beethoven kept his chamber pot under his piano when he wasn't chucking it at long-suffering housekeepers. So mess didn't seem to bother Beethoven. Nature was where he found his ultimate inspiration. And as soon as the weather improved, he was out there. This is the sort of thing that he wrote to friends because he was a troubled man. I am convinced that the glorious beauties of nature and the lovely surroundings of Baden will restore my balance, and a twofold calm will take control of me. To stay in town during the summer is torture to me. And there's a description of Beethoven walking in the country by his friends. He took intense delight in flowers, in clouds. Nature, apparently, in this description, nature was like food to him. He seemed really to live in it. He would sit down on any green bank that offered a good seat and allow his thoughts free course. And he said, I always have a picture in my mind when I'm composing, and then I work up to it. So when Beethoven had escaped the city walls, there he is. That's really what he kind of looked like. Everything began to flow for him. He walked briskly, intensely over long distances, while his creativity expanded to fill the vast spaces around him. He cut a really strange figure sometimes. People thought he was some elderly tramp. They didn't believe he was Beethoven. He didn't care. And we're used to, you know, epic pieces of music that come from Beethoven, you know. Are you ready for this? And that one. Or perhaps this, you know. You did all grow up with that, didn't you? So that's kind of how we associate Beethoven, but you know, he was equally at home composing really immensely beautiful and lyrical works. And I thought we could walk with Beethoven as he strides out from the confines of Vienna and creates something really magical. This is a shot of the Vienna walls as they were exactly when he was living there, and once he got outside them, you can see where he was walking. And these are the places that it took him. So Beethoven wrote his Symphony No. 6 in the around 1806, 1807. It's called the Pastoral Symphony. And it's the only one where Beethoven actually gives the movements descriptive titles. It's describing titles about the countryside and country folk and shepherd songs, and there's a movement entitled Storm. Nobody else did that, and he very rarely did it. And it is really just an astonishingly beautiful depiction of how Beethoven experienced the Viennese woods and the fields. But here's the thing. By the time Beethoven composed this work, he was almost completely deaf. everything that he gives to us as an oral picture, he couldn't hear himself. He's entirely relying on his memory and his other senses. Let me show you how this first movement opens so you know what to listen for. It's a very, very magical opening. So here we are. There's my magic sheet here. Good. So we have this lovely open fifth, and then up comes this melody out of nowhere. It seems to grow out of the wind. And it stops. It's almost like we walk out of the gates with him, and suddenly there's air, and there's vistas, and there's a moment where we breathe and we try and take it in, and everything turns into a kind of beautiful technicolor. I'll play it again. And then he pauses, and then he goes on walking. He's listening to birds in his mind, and he repeats and repeats and repeats this. He just goes round and round and round. Composers weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to develop an idea, but he pauses for a moment, and literally there's this sort of static beauty. And that's how this movement opens, and it is exquisite, and it takes us out of bricks and mortar and into a dreamlike and beautiful countryside. So I'm going to let Beethoven do that for us. Bring it down. Very, very lovely. So Beethoven, of course, wasn't the only person to create music from the natural world. This guy. One minute. Let's change the slide. So, yeah, this guy. The Four Seasons. This guy wrote it. So each of Vivaldi's seasons is actually a violin concerto. So it's a concerto with 3 movements, and there's 12 movements in all. But not everyone knows that Vivaldi wrote a highly descriptive poem for each concerto, and the lines themselves are printed on the musical score. And they fit the music, or you could say that the music fits the words. I did think about reading a poem, his poem for Autumn, as it describes, drunken peasants falling over. And this really music's quite funny, actually. But it also describes a hunt where the unfortunate boar is killed with musket shots, somewhat descriptively. And I thought if you're a vegetarian, that would probably ruin your day and spoil the music forever. But I did want to show you the middle movement of his winter concerto. And this is a bit of Vivaldi's winter poem. This is what he wrote for winter. to shiver icily in the freezing dark, in the teeth of a cruel wind, to stamp your feet all the time, so chilled that your teeth chatter. This is the bit of text that pertains to the second movement. While to remain in quiet contentment by the fireside, while outside the rain pours in torrents. We all know what that feels like, right? Let's just give him another quick look there. So, how does Vivaldi create the sense of we're inside and the weather's outside and the water's dripping down the window panes, and he's just marvelous at it. So he has cellos going. And he has the violins plucking. So you know that feeling when you're looking out and the fire feels great and the weather looks wonderful and frightful from the inside. And then over the tune, over the top, we have the tune. And that's how Vivaldi does it. It's very simple. He just does it with little pizzicatos and plinky-plonkies, and just a sense of contentment and satisfaction that comes from the warmth of being by the fireside. So I wanted you to hear that, because it's pretty magical once you know what's going on. Bring it down. Beautiful stuff. So, let's go on to our next composer, who is Edvard Grieg. Do you know any Grieg? You sure do. This is Grieg. It's the piano concerto, right? Or you probably know this. In fact, you do know this, you know. Who, you know, hands up, yeah. Whole of the Mountain King, yeah, yeah. So, yes, you know plenty of Grieg. Grieg was another obsessive walker. But this was his backyard, so there's no surprises there, right? And he must have seen thousands of butterflies. We are onto bugs. Must have seen thousands of butterflies because he wrote them exquisitely. I'd like to show you, I'm going to play you this beautiful piece that he wrote. You don't have to look at the screen, you can close your eyes or you can look at me. How does Grieg create butterfly wings? So in his left hand, he's got this flowing, constant figure. And in the right hand, he actually really does create a sense of flutter. He does this. And here we go. And so he flutters his way through the piece. So, like all pieces of music, it's a direct depiction of nature. All this music tries to depict nature directly, but it's a metaphor, it's allegories, it's whatever you want to make of it. So I'd like to play you Grieg's Butterfly. Thank you. Where'd I put it? It's just a lot of moving parts. Dvořák. Antonín Dvořák liked birds. He liked a lot of birds. He grew up in deep rural Bohemia, and birds formed some of the DNA of his musical language. Even pigeons got a look in. He was always feeding pigeons. So one day around 1890 or so, Dvořák received a letter all the way from the New World, from the fabulous Mrs. Jeanette Thurber. Isn't she lovely? Mrs. Thurber was very, very, very wealthy, and she had a vision. She wanted to establish a music conservatory in New York, one where anyone, men and women of any race or class or religion or color or whatever, could study, and Mrs. Thurber would fund them with any scholarships they needed, which was pretty different for the time. As you see, what Jeanette Thurber wants, Jeanette Thurber gets. So she wanted Dvořák to direct her new conservatory and to compose and guide new American talent with his experience. Dvořák demurred, but she persisted. Yes. And she eventually sent him a very large check, which convinced him it wasn't all some kind of hoax. And so he embarked to the New World with his very large family in tow. And he spent on and off about 3 years here and basically a lot of time in New York. So, Dvořák, ring any bells? That's his. Some people actually get it a bit confused because the tune is so well known. It was deeply inspired by his young student and close friend, the great African-American singer and composer, Harry T. Burleigh. And Harry Burleigh would sing Dvořák African-American spirituals, and it was very inspiring for Dvořák. So if you're thinking, sometimes it sounds like a spiritual, it's because Dvořák took such inspiration from the spirituals that he heard sung by Harry Burleigh. So in the summers, Dvořák spent his time in the expat Czech community of Spillville, Iowa. Yes, folks. Spillville, Iowa, and it's still there, and it really is gorgeous. That church is still there. And he loved it out there, and it was a haven. It's so beautiful. And he would happily walk and compose throughout the day all summer. And he listened to more birds. Sometimes they drove him nuts because they woke him up about 3 in the morning. But scholars, he wrote a lot of music where birds are included, and music scholars have a tendency to argue about which birds inspired the work I'm going to play you, so I thought you might want to decide for yourself. So, let me just get this moving. Here is the Scarlet Tanager. So, was it this one? He's a very, very considered singer. He takes these long pauses, he listens, and then he sings a bit more. So was it the Scarlet Tanager, because people thought it was that inspired him? We can take a vote, but, you know. Or was it the red-eyed vireo? I know what I think. I was walking actually near my home in Silver Spring, and I heard this, and I am not a birder. And I thought, that's a red-eyed vireo! And I went charging home, and they've got them in Maryland. So, yeah. So, I'm just going to play you something. Here's our red-eyed vireo. And our red-eyed vireo sounds like this. A bit like that. And Dvořák was always noting down the sounds. And then here's a melody that he created. So I'm going to play this movement, a little bit of it, and you can decide whether it was a Scarlet Tanager or a red-eyed vireo. What do you think? Scarlet Tanager, red-eyed vireo? I think so too. So the scholars are wrong and we're right. So, this is Felix Mendelssohn, he's a German composer, and he wrote one of the most beloved works in the concert repertory, the Hebrides Overture. It's known as Fingal's Cave, and Fingal is and was a mythical Scottish giant that lives in a cave on the island of Staffa. Has anybody ever been to Staffa here? Well, put it on your list. There's nothing like it. So here he is. He's a very dapper-looking guy. Mendelssohn was cultivated and kind and driven to promote and create the finest music. What a dude. And, you know, he was a wonderful pianist. He was a great conductor. He was wonderful friends with Victoria and Albert. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert adored him, and they'd all get together at Buckingham Palace, Buck House to his friends, and they'd all play and sing music together. So, judging by the fancy threads, he doesn't look like much of a hiker. But he was a hiker, and he hiked all over Europe with his friends months at a time, walking and sketching and composing. And the Hebrides Overture was inspired by his travels in Scotland through the Hebrides Islands. The sea can be pretty wild out there. Mendelssohn got horribly seasick. It was very embarrassing. And there's a letter written by his traveling companion to his family. The ladies went down like flies, and some of the gentlemen. Sadly, so did my friend Felix. Well, it didn't stop him, though. So the description in the letter: we were carried on our boat and the hissing sea to the famous Fingal's Cave. A greener roar of waves surely never rushed into a stranger cavern, its many pillars making it look like the inside of an immense organ, black, resounding, empty, only the wide grey sea inside it and out. How does Mendelssohn create this? This was such an important piece of music because he really managed to create almost a myth out of a myth. He depicts the water, he depicts the way the waves behave, but he also depicts images of some kind of ancient, just ancient gods. Fingal as an ancient giant. So we have these deep bass notes and this primitive open fifth. And that's how he opens it. And here's our theme, and it comes right from the deep. And it's going to move up a little bit. It sounds, for a really refined guy, it sounds primitive. It has a quality of ancientness about it. And he gets the water moving with his violins like this. So he gets everything swirling and roaring, and when the waves and the swirl comes up from the bottom of the ocean, the theme does this, and there's this huge running sort of chromatic scale under the bow. So, and we're kind of used to that now, but he was the one that really dreamed up this extremely visual style of music writing, and it gives us everything we need for an internal image of Fingal's Cave. So, where'd I put it? There we go. Let us listen to a bit of this wonderful work. That is an 18th century print of Fingal's Cave. It was always a tourist attraction. That's the cave. Bring it down. Are you there? It's dreamily beautiful, and yep, that's what it's like from the sky. So we'll stay with water for a little while. There's almost no composer who composed water like Claude Debussy when he wasn't composing Moonlight for Clair de Lune. I thought about playing you Clair de Lune, but I want to play you some water. The man had the most extraordinary skill to create drops and streams and glitter and spray and reflection. It's masterful. He told people that he had always wanted to run away to sea, and had things not turned out differently, he would have been a sailor. I have to be honest, I think he really enjoyed his creature comforts a bit too much for that. But he imagined hard. But honestly, if a guy needs a parasol on the beach, you probably aren't really suited for the life of a sailor. What do you think? So I want to introduce you to the picture that he had on his wall, which of course was that one. This was, people always say, who painted it? Well, this person painted it, Katsushita Hokusai. It's a self-portrait. And the picture has such power and it's so famous that it almost basically lives in our popular imagination. We don't always know who painted it. And we also don't always look at it that closely. It has such an epic image to it. We don't always notice not just Fuji in the background, but the little sailors who are about to get drowned out by the water. So Debussy and his comforts were very important to him. And if you look at this picture of his studio, right at the top is a picture of Hokusai's Great Wave. There it is, just there. So he liked to pretend he was out there on the water even when he wasn't. So I'd like to play you a piece of music he wrote called Reflets dans l'eau, Reflections in the Water. And you'll hear a truly visual sense of how water reflects, what it sounds like when you drop a stone in the water. It's just it's truly, I've got pages here, a very, very beautiful and evocative sense purely of water and the reflection of water and where water goes. And it's also, of course, a reflection of our psyches. So. Thank you. We have a couple more very brief pieces of music before we finish up. I want to take you to the work of Ferde Grofé. So you think, I've never heard of Ferde Grofé. Actually, you have. Apart from being a really fine film and orchestral composer, Ferde Grofé was the guy who helped George Gershwin out when George Gershwin first wrote the Rhapsody in Blue. Because at that point, Gershwin wasn't actually that familiar with the niceties of orchestration, and Grofé did the orchestration for him. So you do know Ferde Grofé. So Grofé was also somebody who hiked and walked and walked and hiked. And he was completely hypnotized early in life by the Grand Canyon. And he hiked there overnight. He said, I first saw the dawn because we got there the night before and camped. I was spellbound in the silence, because it got lighter and brighter, and then you could hear the birds chirping and nature coming to life. And all of a sudden, bingo! There it was, the sun. I could hardly describe it in words because words would be inadequate, which is kind of how I feel around Aspen. So there he is. There is Grofé, and there's Gershwin at the piano with Paul Whiteman, who ran the band for the Rhapsody in Blue. I want to play you a little bit of his Grand Canyon Suite. It really needs no explanation because it's so effective as an oral picture of the Grand Canyon. Have a listen. So I want to complete our session by playing you an absolutely beautiful piece of music, a piece of jazz by Alan J. Lerner and Burton Lane, a song called On a Clear Day. Of all the great jazz songs out there, this is one that really does symbolize a sort of a rebirth, a sense of transcendence. It actually comes from a musical about a woman who thinks she has been reincarnated. It's a strange musical, but the piece itself just embodies the way that philosophically and creatively and with our energies we can open up to a beautiful nature. The words themselves, on a clear day, rise and look around you and you'll see who you are. On a clear day, it will astound you that the glow of your being outshines every star. You'll feel part of every mountain, sea and shore. You can hear from far and near a word you've never ever heard before on a clear day. They're absolutely beautiful words by Alan J. Lerner. So for these composers that I've showcased today, and for countless others, nature was the most profound creative stimulus. Nature not only provided spiritual succor, but it was the pathway by which their genius was nourished. Not all of us can access beautiful spaces to nurture us, but music like this opens up a portal for us to walk with great artists, see what they saw, and to feed our own innate creative fire. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to play you On a Clear Day. And then you can just exit into a clear day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.